Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where today, I've got to say, I'm genuinely excited to get today's guest onto the podcast because I've seen him do everything from rap, delivering keynotes, answering questions in a media briefing. And when you hear him talk today, you'll find also that he's got this great positive energy about him and able to light up any room that he walks into. And at a time where every business is talking about the power and importance of digital experiences, I want to find out a little bit more about what does that actually mean and dare to look beyond the buzzwords to the business value that it offers. So today's guest is Dave Anderson, who some of you listening will know from his time at Dynatrace, but he's now at a company called Contentsquare, which helps brands deliver the power to make the digital world more human. And many of you may remember a few years ago, I interviewed, I think it was Jean-Marc from Contentsquare at a tech conference in Vegas. And essentially, it's an AI-powered platform that provides rich and contextual insights into things like customer behaviours, feelings and intent at every touch point in their journey, essentially enabling businesses to build empathy and create a more lasting impact. And they were founded in Paris with offices all over the world, and I think they've raised something like $1.4 billion in investment funding over the years. But we have lots to talk about, not just about Contentsquare, but we also have Dave's origin story. He's got a podcast too. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world right now, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Australia, where Dave is waiting to join us in conversation today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
G'day, Neil. My name's Dave Anderson, and I've been working in marketing for a long period of time, tech marketing, B2B, SaaS. I've been fortunate enough to travel the world, working across Australasia. Naturally, I have an Australian accent. So across Australia, Europe, and lately, or just most recently prior to COVID, in the US. Fortunate to work for a company that helped position them for an IPO. Ran a ridiculously good team and worked with some amazing people in like high-tech startup space. And now I'm back in Australia consulting with a company called Contentsquare. And I'm also a dad, part-time musician, failing, recording an album, and a podcast host, amongst many things.
Wow, I thought I span a lot of plates, man. But I'd love to take you back in time a moment, because there's a lot to unpack from what you just said there, from marketing, technology, startups, etc. So can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or was there a moment that lit the spark in you and put you on this path you're on today?
Yeah, my dad was super creative, and he ran a hardware store business that he inherited from his dad for a long period of time, but I don't think he ever really wanted to do that. He came home once with an Apple IIc computer, which I think was one of the first color Apples, right? And this is pre-Macintosh. So you'd have to put the floppy disk in and you'd have to type in run catalog, which I spelt incorrectly, but it still managed to figure it out. Or I spelt it in the US format and people told me it was spelt wrong. But I remember having this computer and I was like, this is superb. And then I remember things like teletext on the TV. And I was like, oh, I can type in like 999 and it will tell me the weather. I go, this is cool. What is this thing? How is this doing this with the TV? This is really interesting. And so I just really sort of loved that concept. And then I got into like Atari 2600. I had the very original console. Beautiful. Dad brought me that as well. Like, see, Dad's embraced all these things. He taught me all this stuff and I don't ever give him credit for it, and I should. But and I really got into Atari, and I think it was my Atari, or maybe eventually I got a Nintendo later than everyone else. And I worked out how to mod games, because in Australia, we couldn't get all the games and they're really expensive, but you can get them really cheap in Singapore. So I used to get games and then get a converter, and then I'd convert the games, and started working out how I can sort of get around paying full price for things. This is at a very early age. I might have been 12.
Yeah.
I worked out how to get cheaper games from overseas, and I thought this tech was cool and it was convenient and it was fun and I was learning things. And so, yeah, I guess that's sort of like where I embraced it as a young kid. I did a sports science degree, which had nothing to do with technology really at the time, does a lot now with AI, and decided I was going to go into selling mobile phones to make money. And made enough money, and I was so passionate about the phones that were coming out, the Nokia 6210 and the Nokia 8210 and the Siemens that could store 5 songs. eventually I paid for myself to do an MBA on the back of someone coming into the store telling me, "You're wasted in here. What are you doing with the rest of your life? Why are you working in this store just selling phones?" And I said, "What do you mean? Am I not doing a good job?" And I really helped this guy out. He ran a big trucking business. And this is a long story, which I haven't got time for in this podcast, but don't judge a book by a character, because this guy came in with bad shorts, ripped shirt, thongs, or flip-flops, as I should say in Europe. Sorry about that. So no thongs involved in this story. Flip-flops. And the guy that I was working with, he was like, "I'm not going to go serve him." I said, "Oh, I'll go help him." And he was just after a car kit. Turns out this guy had 12 trucks, was running a major business, and I calculated what I could save him based on upgrading his plan, getting him free phones, getting him free car kits, saved him like half of his bill, and also got him all this convenience at the same time. And I just did it because I was passionate and I liked helping people. And he just came back in one day and sat down with me and said, "Right, what are you doing with the rest of your life? You can't keep doing this. You got a really good business brain. You need to really focus on what it is that you're doing." And it was a combination of that and my stepdad, who was very successful in the car industry. They both said, "Go back to university, do an MBA, get a business degree, and then go." And so I was able to fund my MBA through my mobile phone commission, and through some dodgy car salesmanship that I would use to book appointments and all sorts of things that I learned. It was really good, actually. And a combination of those things, led me to basically eventually getting a job at HP, and sort of the rest is history. From there, I became very passionate and could follow a passionate in enterprise technology.
Wow, that'll blow me away, because I've interviewed, 2,200 people on this podcast. I always ask the origin story question. And the amount of people that say it was those early iterations of tech, that wooden veneer finish on the Atari 2600 just ignited something in them. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, where there's that individual that walked into that store, almost like a moment of serendipity. The universe put that person in front of you. Nobody else was interested. You took the time. And it's almost like life gives us a little push in the right direction when we need it sometimes.
Sometimes the universe inspires to give you what you want. I read that in the Celestian prophecy when I was lost as a young 20-year-old somewhere in Europe trying to figure out what I wanted to be. And in that book, it said, if you have a vision or you aspire to do something, the world will conspire to help you get there. And there'll be other things that it will throw in your way as well. But if you treat everything as a lesson, there are opportunities. And I do believe by doing the right thing for this guy and treating everyone with the right respect, he paid it back to me and set me on a path. And in the same way, my stepdad was also a really good inspiration. So it was like these father figures and like in this day and age, I don't want to be disrespectful to any of women, or that's just what it was for me. And I just had these three guys that really were innovative and really helped me on my way, and empathetic in their way, that they sort of, their passion and their inspiration and their guidance and their role modeling shaped me to go into a career in tech and to keep following my passion.
Such a powerful story. And of course, the last time I actually saw you was pre-pandemic, where you were on stage in Las Vegas in front of thousands of people singing a rendition of Ice Ice Baby with the lyrics changed to Full Stack Baby. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about that moment? And does it still follow you around 3 years later?
Oh, this is one of those stories where you're like, when Ricky Gervais, when he does that in The Office, he sits in a circle and he plays his guitar, and it's just the most cringeworthy moment ever. I think it's a little bit like that, but I think B2B tech conferences, I think I'm blessed to be in B2B tech because I think people make so many mistakes. I think it's fun. It's really fun, and you're allowed to have fun because ultimately a business buyer is a consumer. You don't have to treat them like a business buyer. And I learned that a little bit from working at HP, where the more words you could put into a sentence, the more intelligent you sound, the more you would pay for the technology. And all it did was just confuse everyone. And I was like, there's got to be a better way than this. Fast forward to this song, we're running this conference, and I go, how do we start this conference with something different, something that's really memorable, that will make people go, gee, this company is fun. This is good. I really want to work with this tech. This is cool. This brand is really cool. So anyway, my team and I was running a fairly large marketing organization, but I really had an affiliation for the brand and creative team because they were like kindred souls. And we would do what's called a creative powwow. Creative powwow was once a week. We'd create a topic, we'd sit around, we'd have some drinks, and we would just come up with some topics. Sometimes we actually came out with an outcome. Other times we'd sit around and watch YouTube videos and just laugh at kittens. This one particular time we're sitting around, we're like, how do we start the event? How should we start this conference? What should we do? And I go, I've always wanted to do a song. That'd be kind of cool. Like, it is the Chelsea Theatre in Las Vegas. They play pretty good music there. And they're like, oh yeah, what could we do? And for some reason in the background, someone was playing Full Stack. I can't actually get the song right anymore. Ice, Ice Baby. So they were playing Ice, Ice Baby. Dun, 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 dun. And I started going, Full Stack Baby. Dun, dun, dun. And which is market started laughing, right? Thought it was hilarious. And then I just started writing lyrics on the top of the original. All right, stop, automate and listen. Dynatrace with a brand new edition, Smartscape. And it just all came out. It just kept coming out like immediately. And I do songwriting in my spare time. But it was a moment, and it was so funny because I was laughing while I was writing it down, and our creative director grabbed a phone and he was filming. And so I have the footage. It's very, very funny of me just laughing my head off going, this would be so funny. Imagine if we came out. And I was going, singing this song, and eventually wrote all the song out. And then we were like, do we do it? And I spoke to a friend of mine who ran the event stage and everything, and I didn't want it to go to the CEO. I didn't want anyone to know about it because I thought they might squash it. And I was like, I'm going to let our team decide whether or not this is the right thing to do, which is pretty risky, but it's worth a risk, right? And went to the event director, Claire, and I said, hey, I've got this rap. I think we should do it, right? And she goes, don't be ridiculous. And she goes, you're going to rap in front of everyone? And I went, yep. And Josh, my creative director, is going, damn straight we're doing it. We are so doing it. And so he did all the lights and the wording. He even spelt like on one slide. We rushed it so much at the end. We pulled it together like the day before, the actual proper, like what we were going to do on the stage. He taught me to rap. I don't know how to rap. So he taught me how to run around and dance. Anyway, gosh, long story and very, very funny story. So I'm shaking before I go on stage, and I don't shake when I go in front of people normally. Yeah. And I'm shaking, and because I remember looking at my leg, and my leg's going up and down, and I'm thinking, this is either going to be the best thing that I've ever done in my career or simply the worst. And I remember the music stopping, and I was called to go on stage, and I went, there's only one way I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
And on I went, and I just let rip. And thankfully, the Dynatrace community just went brilliant, like brilliant. And we didn't do it for too long. And people saw the funny side, and we did it in a way that I think was sort of respectful and funny. And I don't know, you could tell me what you thought. But then afterwards, the feedback was amazing. They said it was so good, really well in taste. We decided to get T-shirts made. Like I'm wearing one right now, just for the old time's sake. We got Full Stack Baby T-shirts made and gave them all away, only because of the response that we got from everyone. But So I still, to this day, 3 years later, I still have people going, oh, that's the guy that did the rap, and he did this, and the video gets circulated everywhere. But the one funny story is I was working for this other company in AI, and I was on a really serious call, right? And so the sales team had been like at me for ages going, Dave, you're presenting to the CIO, the CTO, the CEO, the CMO, all these C words. And I'm going, yeah, it'd be cool. It's cool. I know what I'm doing, right? And so I had 15 minutes of the opening of this presentation to, lighten the mood a little bit. It's a large insurance company in Malaysia. They tend to be a little bit serious too. Yeah. So I was a little bit like, oh, they're not really going to like my sense of humor. And so they were all worried about it. I get on the call, and I kid you not, the CIO goes, Dave, is that you? And I go, yeah, it's me. Who's that? And he goes, it's blah, blah, blah. And he goes, we've worked with you at Dynatrace. And I went, oh my God. And he goes, man, he turns around, the next thing out of his mouth, he goes, this guy's brilliant. He sung in front of everyone at this Perform conference. He always does raps. He tells the best stories. Oh, this is going to be the best presentation. Oh, no. And I was like, oh my God. But he helped he helped soften every time I tried to land some form of joke. He'd be laughing and sharing, and like he was a great supporter. So yes, it continues to this day, and thankfully I did it and stepped out of my comfort zone and did something a bit crazy, and the community likes you for it, I guess. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and you'd have no idea you were nervous or shaking before when you came out. You just completely owned it and rocked it. And I go to a lot of tech conferences around the world, and tech can be quite a dry subject and can also be quite difficult to find something to write about in an entertaining way when you're at a conference. But you just blew it away. And straight away, I'll always remember Twitter just lit up straight away. And the show floor and other interviews I was doing around that time, that's all anyone was talking about. So, yeah, it was fantastic. It really was. And fast forward to present day, of course, and now you're with Contentsquare. And bizarrely, I have another Vegas story around that about hanging out. I think it was the ex-chief strategy officer, Jean-Marc. We had an interview, then he took me in a room that was just full of fake dollar bills. It all goes a bit blurry after that. But can you set the scene and tell listeners a little bit more about Contentsquare, the problems you solved, just for anyone that missed that previous chat?
I like how it all goes blurry, because what starts in Vegas stays in Vegas. Like you tell part of the story, you don't quite finish what happened after that. So, firstly, thanks for the compliment. It was always my intention for that event to have energy and to have buzz, and that's why I did what I did. I just wanted that feeling. Contentsquare is a really cool company. Even for my period of time at Dynatrace, I really wanted to be focused on the experience element of what Dynatrace did, which was, and they do it to some extent, but right out to like the business impact. What's the experience of users as they're using these mobile apps and these digital services? How do we design better experiences that helps them check out faster, increase shopping carts, reduce churn, improve revenue, all these sort of things? And it's always been a challenge, because every company's going, well, we're really focused on digital experience. It's the single most important thing that we have as a company. And you're like, well, then which part of this company is actually looking at the experience of every customer as they come through the site? And they're like, marketing's going, well, we got web analytics and we're looking at like bounce rates and visitors and things like that. And you got like customer support and like, we're looking at net promoter score and voice of the customer. And you got the tech teams, and they're like, we got observability metrics. And you're like, wait a second, there seems to be a little bit of a gap. Has anyone noticed the elephant in the room? So yeah, I joined Contentsquare because I see this ridiculous opportunity where it's a really cool opportunity for a company to really be able to focus in on actually understanding that customer. And what is that, or that prospect or that person going through a site? Is it a good experience? Is it a bad experience? How do we enhance it? How do we make it better? And ultimately, how do we then maximize our revenue, reduce churn, do all these sort of things? And it's really easy to implement, but it's odd. It's an industry that's not really that well known because it doesn't really fit in a bucket. It's not defined by Gartner either, which is one of those things where it hasn't reached that tipping point yet. And so I just think there's like all the tech I had when I was a kid, I reckon I'm like on the cusp of like, this is actually really cool. More people should be paying attention to it because it has more importance to companies' bottom lines, and they're not there yet. And I think the rest of the market's soon going to catch up. And so that's why I joined Contentsquare, because it's a leader in that industry, and the tech is very cool, and there's a lot of education that can be done in the market. And I like that. I like the idea of educating and positioning and helping both Contentsquare, but also helping the customer understand the value.
And before we started recording the podcast today, we were talking about web experiences and how very often people focus on the wrong areas. So to set the scene for our conversation today, can you tell me more about the emergence of things like apps and reliability, and also the lack of focus on the experience? Because as you said a few moments ago, experience, that's the big buzzword. That's the only thing that's important everyone's going after, but they then focus on something completely different. So I'm curious, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I just think we're still in the infancy of maturity when it comes to digital. Like, I think we're so fortunate to live in the period that we've lived in, where we saw, the emergence of the search engines and obviously websites, and then, Steve Jobs launching the mobile phone, and you're sort of looking at this iPhone and going, really? And then iPads, which were, people thought were a bit of a joke, but there's an app for everything, and apps are more important than anything these days. And we want digital services that are fast, reliable, And yet what actually ends up happening is that we don't have experiences that deliver what we expect. They fail, they crash, they're slow, can't check out, can't log in, all these sorts of things. And I think what ends up happening internally, if we actually sort of turn the lens in on to the companies, is we're still in these traditional business models where we still have the marketing team and we have the technology team and even if you bury into the technology team, you have the infrastructure team, the app team, the site reliability team. You have all these teams, and we created all these silos. And then we layer in all of this data analytics. Like if you look at all the software providers that exist in the world, you have a better back wall covering than all of my albums that I have behind me. It would be so many colors of the rainbow of all this software, but we still haven't quite worked out how do we actually figure out the customer experience. What is a user doing when they come to the site? Where are they going and why? And how do they get from A to B as quickly and efficiently as possible and have it work? And so, I think we're sort of in this phase where we're not quite mature enough, and traditional companies have created data silos, and we have too much data layered on top of it, and we haven't quite focused in on the right things. And so I think with the advancement of AI, I think with the improvement in technologies like Contentsquare, it sort of refocuses us in on actually what really matters. We were talking about fonts.
Yeah.
So you said the font on my website looked really good. And I said, no, you didn't say that, actually. You said the website looks really good. And I said to you, I really needed to fine tune some things. I needed to tweak the fonts. And I was going and falling into the same trap everyone does, which is I'm looking at this from a pure UX design standpoint and going, I could spend 10 hours making this look really pretty, but does it matter? It didn't matter to you. You went to the site and you went, I think it's great. And so I think if I'd spent ate, what do they say? Eat your own dog food. If I ate my own dog food, I would look at it and I'd go, well, does it make any meaningful difference for me to spend any time on this? Or should I just focus on what people want out of my site and improve that journey versus improve the aesthetics and the design capabilities? So I just think it's a lack of attention.
Yeah, 100%.
Just no attention on the right things.
And of course, the other big projects, the other big topics right now is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and just about any company that rings up and pitches to a business will have some form of AI in their solution, even if there isn't AI in there half the time. But there's another story. But of course, I was doing a bit of research on you, and I was reading that you think that many companies can't actually unlock AI projects because they're essentially science projects. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's so AI is everything to everyone and nothing at the same time. Like it's like the media will tell you that it's coming to take our jobs and it's going to take over the world, and yet the reality of the people that actually work with AI go, it's not even a toddler. It can't even crawl. Like we're so far away from anything meaningful. We're so far from that, and there's so many different schools of thought. And as a marketer, I marketed AI for a long period of time, and there's a buzz around it. And I think there's different things that are going on. I think there's AI in platforms. So there's the company like Dynatrace that I worked with. It's a very bespoke AI that is like walled garden and designed to do exactly what it's designed to do, which is design and give you a root cause for an issue that it's in its own domain and it really understands. Like a broader AI, though, that isn't in a platform, that goes across platforms, that requires tweaking algorithms, creating models, checking the data, understanding the data, not having bias, really thinking about the outcomes, and those models keep changing. The problem is most of these projects fail. So they reckon, I think it's 75% of these AI projects fail. And a lot of people say that it's actually, and there was a survey recently, and it's the same results every year. The reason it fails is not to do with the technology, it's to do with the culture. We're back again into this school of thought where technology teams are being driven to drive outcomes. They don't have time for experimentation. They need to get results, and AI takes time. This is a new technology that requires a team to really play. They've got to go out into the schoolyard and play with this stuff, and they've got to see what reactions happen when you mix these chemicals with that chemical, and what does it taste like in the end. And I think that's where the problem is. We're not allowing enough innovation and enough scope and enough flexibility for people to experiment. But when they do, they see meaningful results. But it's too early in the piece yet for us. And so I think even in like an economic downturn, it becomes even more difficult for companies to justify the budgets to spend the extra money to go, you guys go and do your science experiment and come back and tell us what you think. But a lot of companies have been successful with it. It's just there's pockets of it right now. It's not mainstream. It's very early. It's very exciting, but it's very early in the infancy of like sort of maturity, and most companies are still dabbling. Would probably be the right word.
And there was a great quote, I think it was from IBM about 10 years ago now, and they said that the best experience you have anywhere becomes your standard expectation for what you expect anywhere. So as a result, everyone's trying to improve their digital experiences. And I want to try and how that works in the real world and what that actually looks like, and maybe offer something a little bit tangible around that. So with the work you're doing at Contentsquare, do you have any use cases that you can just share to bring to life how you're helping people identify those ways of improving digital experiences and get beyond the buzzword?
I didn't know that was an IBM quote that talked about the benchmarks, but that 10 years ago, that's impressive. And it's actually a slide that I've used many times before where I talk about your next experience, your next best experience is the new benchmark for what you expect. And you think about like what we have now with Spotify, Netflix, Uber, like all of these digital services, they're fast, they're reliable, we get what we want, there's no nonsense. We expect exactly the same thing, unfortunately, when we use our airline, our insurance company, our telco, and they're not blessed with the budgets and the teams that can make the same type of innovation happen. So I wouldn't say they need to cheat. They just need to be smarter about how it is that and they got to really, these teams, these insurance companies, these banks, these telcos, these retailers, they got to laser in on really what matters, because they're not going to compete on the big field. They're going to go, right, we're going to get good at kicking, and that's all we're going to do. We're going to win the game by kicking, and that's what we have to focus on. And I think there was a great example actually of so narrowing their focus. I went to my very first Contentsquare event, and I heard from a telco, and that telco is a leading telco in Australasia, and they did a very simple use case where they said, look, we just laser focused in on the conversion of a particular product that we were really focused on, and we put analytics on that conversion process, and we really studied it, and we looked at page design, and could we shorten the page design, simplify the form, and would that improve conversion rates? Conversion rates went up by 50% when they made that change. So you go, well, I reckon you proved your case pretty well. And then in another use, and that same thing, I went, wow, like 50% improvement just by some small tweaking in the design, A/B testing, looking at the analytics, bang, great outcome. The other one was another leading retailer in Australia, and they were able to tell a better story with their data as a result of using the analytics. So they worked out that, look, it's no point having brand stories at the top of our page. People are coming to our site because they want shoes. And they could do a very simple visual overlay and work out that they're actually the people below the fold, they want that shoe and they want that shoe. They don't want to read about the guy on the horse. They don't care about the horse. They want the shoes. And so they were able to flip that around, and the whole team became focused in on like, okay, let's get the product higher up on the page. They can make better decisions that increases revenue. And then one other story is a bank. A bank was able to improve their conversion rate by, this is cool because they improved the accessibility of a form, which is really, really important in digital today, and not many companies are doing it. So much of our population, I think it's like 1 in 5, have a disability that they can't read forms or the sites properly. And yet we still design forms for able-bodied and able-sighted or hearing people. And they basically improved the accessibility of that form, gave a zoom functionality, kept it really simple, and improved the conversion rates by 15%. And it was just like the smallest 3-minute little thing. 3 minutes. Okay, I'm lying. Everyone's going to call me out on that. It probably took a few hours, at least maybe a couple of days. But 12% for a bank on a conversion rate is pretty significant dollars. Same for the telco, same for the retailer. So simple. I actually think, and the beauty of this is there's simplicity and there's benefits to be had. You just got to look for it, and you got to focus.
It reminds me of the Team GB thing, the cycling team. If you saw that a few years ago, where they focused on marginal gains, just increase everything by 1%, whether it be the seat, whether it be the tyres, whether it be the comfort of the coach that takes them from A to B. If you increase everything by 1%, it can make huge differences, can't it?
Yeah, the 1%ers add up, and I don't follow Team GB at all. Yeah. And naturally, being Australian. And I do like the fact, though, that the English win most of the events sitting down, the rowing, the cycling. Have you heard that one, though, right?
No.
You haven't heard that?
No.
Yeah. But you're right. The 1%ers make a massive difference. And if that's all you can do. If you're a really good company, you find, so there's two pieces of advice. It's like, if you're a really good company and you're doing really well, you're Team GB and you're an Olympic champion, you just need to fine tune, then yeah, it's 1% that are going to make the difference. If you're like most organizations, you're probably like, you actually need to laser focus. You actually need to start riding the bike. Yeah. And you actually need a good bike. You need the right outfit. You need to start training. And that's probably where a lot of companies are at today, that they're actually so far off the track that they need to go back in and go, what is our most important 3 to 5 user journeys? Let's laser focus on that. And then let's share the results that we get from improving those that will fuel the rest of the project that we need to do. And after a while, you start to develop this momentum where it's like, great, we've done the 3 to 5. Let's go broader. Let's go bigger. Let's get more budgets. And you start to get your own program running.
And I'm curious on that. What are the biggest mistakes that businesses are making? What should they be focusing on? I'm sure you've seen a lot of trends there and how they're all making those same mistakes, but is there any that really stand out?
I think they're just prioritizing the wrong things. Yeah. I think companies sometimes, there's a couple of things, and I've done some good podcasts with people that talk about, a lot of people are too focused on the data, too focused on what the data is telling them, and they're collecting the wrong data. So like, there's a famous story, a very good friend of mine, Trisha Wong, she did a TED talk on this and like, fabulous story. And I highly encourage people to go follow her. She's a very, very interesting person. She talked about how Nokia was receiving all of the data that they were going to crush the iPhone.
Yeah.
Wrong data. And she was in China going, I think this iPhone thing's going to be pretty big. And it just completely, it was a whole category killer, just came out of nowhere. And I think companies make the mistake of getting bogged down in all of the data. And they just, she said, why is it we have more intelligent dashboards than we ever have before, but we're still we have more data than we've ever had before, but we're creating more dashboards than ever. We have analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
How much data do we really need? Focus on the data that actually is the laser focus. What is singly the most important data that we can collect, and fine tune based on that. And I reckon that's where people aren't telling stories with the data they're collecting. They're just collecting it and then just reciting it back to their line management and saying it's a 30% bounce rate and I don't know why.
Yeah, 100%. And in a former life, I used to get frustrated in my IT days that whenever a new shiny tech project would come in, everyone would get distracted by the technology and use it as a way of almost to reduce headcount or reduce people, rather than looking at it the other way and how technology and people alongside each other can complement each other rather than compete against each other. And on this podcast, I always cheesily say that technology works best when it brings people together. And that brings me to your podcast, Tech Seeking Human. Great title, because again, I think it highlights the importance of technology and humans working together. But can you tell me a little bit more about the podcast? Because you've had some pretty big names on there too, right?
Yeah. I started it, obviously, we were chatting before. I started it in COVID because I was fascinated by I wasn't fascinated by the idea of being locked in the house with my family. I liked it, but I wanted an outlet and I wanted an opportunity to learn. And I figured, what better way to learn than to start a podcast and really start to understand, hey, where is this software and AI and technology going? And it was At school, I got personally fascinated by it. I really got into sort of understanding AI, and I would talk to people at soccer or at my daughter's pickup at school, and they would go, "What do you do for work?" And I said, "Oh, well, I sort of work as an AI evangelist," which is a bit weird, but basically I talk about technology and where it's going. And they go, what should my daughter do at school when she leaves? Like, what sort of jobs is there for her? And I go, oh, I sort of know. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I sort of was like, well, it's kind of a fascinating journey to go and find out. And the questions that kept coming were really similar. And so, yeah, I just set on a path with my co-host and friend Claire, and we just started interviewing people. We started asking them the question about, where do you think technology is going? What do you think AI is going to do? And yeah, we're lucky to have met people like Adam Chaya, who started Siri, and Ellen Broad, who's a leader in Australia, Hannah Fry out of the UK, Gene Kim, who's the DevOps king, wrote the Phoenix Project. Gosh, the list goes on, and I've got more to come as well. But just lessons in tech, lessons in life, lessons in like, what should we do with it? And the most important thing, to your point, is, what does it mean for us as humans? What should we do with this technology? Should we change the way that we behave? Should we stop doing these things on social media? Should we change laws? Should we be better parents? Should we be careful of what cameras we put in our house? Just all of the big questions that you often get asked, and you don't know the answers to. We still don't really know the answers to them, but I just think it's a fascinating conversation and a pretty cool topic.
And it is a great podcast. So I urge people listening to check that out. And I always like to end the podcast because we started talking about your origin story. And as we come full circle, I always like to end on a bit of an open-ended question. And that's ask you, is there a person that you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why? Or maybe share a funny or interesting story that has happened to you, or maybe just someone that's that you're grateful towards to helping you get you where you are today. Do any of those resonate with you? Would you like to take a stab at one of those?
Oh my gosh, that's a difficult question. Because of COVID and because I left America, I miss my team that I used to work with, the people that I had creative chats with. They were so much fun, and I'd go to work for them. And I would love to have a breakfast champagne with all of them at any point in time, particularly because I left and didn't get a very good goodbye with those people. But I was fortunate enough to meet Magic Johnson during COVID, and I had a 1 hour chat with him for an event that we were running, and he was an idol of mine. And he offered me courtside tickets at the end of the chat. He seemed to have really enjoyed it. And I know he probably does lots of them, but it meant a lot to me to meet him. As a kid growing up, he was always my idol. And so I had an awesome opportunity. And I meet lots of really cool people. And so the weirdest one that I want to say, Neil, is a bit strange. I became really obsessed by Peloton in lockdown. Like, I really loved, I burnt out in work. Like, I properly burnt out. I had a near-on nervous breakdown. I was working too hard. I was stressed. I was traveling. COVID was a really good reset for me. And I always had, as I said, I did a sports science degree. I was able to go back into my health and fitness through Peloton. I never thought a virtual instructor would help me get there, but I really underestimated the value that comes from positive affirmations, positive energy. And I write down their quotes every time I do a class now, and I do it every single day, and I'm now the fittest I've ever been. So it's sort of like a strange one, but I would want to have breakfast with Bex Gentry, who I admire as an athlete, but also a role model to the other Peloton instructors, and also a role model and an inspiration to me in my running. I'm running better than I ever have, and she has a positive energy, and she just wears her heart on her sleeve. And if I had an opportunity to meet anyone, I know it sounds really strange. I spent so much time with her virtually. I sort of feel like we know each other, but she gives me a shout out every now and then. So I'm sure somehow she knows my username exists, but I'd love the opportunity just to say thanks and have an opportunity to chat and tell her and make her feel, thankful or rewarded or, happy that she had such a huge impact on my life and everyone else that she impacts at the same time. So she nearly made the Olympics for Great Britain. If you didn't know this too, she was only like 10 seconds or 15 seconds off. She finished fourth in the marathon, and she came in as a professional athlete, like she's an instructor in New York that runs on a treadmill, but an amazing athlete, and she turned up and she nearly made it. So for anyone also who hasn't seen this, check out her documentary on YouTube, Bex Gentry, and her sort of journey to try and make the Olympic team. It's a real inspiration to my daughters. Both of them sat and watched the whole thing and didn't move and were so inspired by what they saw. That's the sort of stuff I love. Content. You love content. I love content. These people generate best content in the world that inspires you, and they're genuine people. And so that would be my long-winded answer to your question. Sorry it took so long.
No, it's a brilliant answer, and we'll send that out into the ether, see if we can manifest something there. I think it's so important to share stories like that, because Bex will be there doing what is essentially her job, her role every day, but having not too much of an idea of how much impact she's had on your life. And then you multiply that by all the thousands of people around the world. And I know how obsessed people get with Peloton. It's something I need to explore myself. It scares me a little bit, but we will dive in there. And before I let you go today, for anyone listening, just want to find out more information about Contentsquare, your podcast, or anything we discussed today, what's the best starting point for everything?
I'd probably start with Google. That'd be a good place to start to go get. So yeah, it's just Google search Contentsquare and have a look at that. And my podcast is called Tech Seeking Human. Same thing. If you search for it, it's in Spotify and a few other things, platforms that you can get. Happy to connect with people on LinkedIn too. If you had a chance to have a listen, I really use that platform a lot to learn from people and to connect with people. So if you search for Dave Anderson on LinkedIn and maybe put Dynatrace or Contentsquare, I'm sure you'll find me. I'm happy to connect, and I would love feedback in the same way that Bex loved feedback. We would love to get my feedback. I'm sure I would love to get your feedback. If you had a listen and you enjoyed it, it would make my day to connect with you and yeah, see if we can start up a community somehow.
Well, so much I've loved about our conversation today. Finally getting to meet you in person on here and have a good sit down. It's been long overdue. But talking about AI, where it's heading, how businesses can unlock AI projects, what they could be doing differently, etc. But I think it's your very human story. You are hugely successful. Spoke with some amazing people around the world, including Magic Johnson during COVID. I need to find out more information on that story at some point. But I think more than anything, it's how your openness and how you can also talk about the struggles. I mean, you mentioned the period there where you wrestled with burnout, and also at the very beginning, how nervous you were before going on stage and blowing everyone away. I think it's so important to share that stuff too. So a big thank you for being so open, transparent, and sharing your story with everyone today.
I had a great time, Neil. Thank you so much for having me. And anytime I get an opportunity to chat with someone like you, I jump at the opportunity. So I really appreciate you as a host, and it's a great podcast. So thanks for having me on.
As I said at the very beginning, Dave's just a great guy. So much energy, so much positivity, a real good vibe about him, and someone you could just sit down with and just chat to for hours. And I love how he also talked about the human aspect behind digital transformation technologies. So important and so often missed. But we did cover a lot there, so I'm curious, were there any takeaways from you? Was there anything that sparked something in you or resonated with you that you'd like to go off at a tangent and talk about with me? You can come on the podcast, you can send me an audio message on social media, you can send me an email on LinkedIn. I'm the easiest guy in the world to find. All you got to do is email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, send a written or audio message on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where we've got over 2,200 interviews now. So I cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow. We've got another guest lined up already. So a big thank you for listening, though. And until next time, don't be a stranger.